80% of Muslims have no idea what the Quran actually says. You know, these guys over here, they say, you know something? The Jews have no right to the land of Israel. That belongs to us. The Jews have no right to the city of Jerusalem. That belongs to us. But I would like to counteract that with those guys over there and say, well, I'll tell you what, let me get my Bible, you get your Quran. And let's compare how many times Jerusalem is mentioned in either text. Now, I can open up my Bible and show you 823 times where Jerusalem is mentioned. Jerusalem is mentioned 669 times in the Old Testament. It's mentioned 154 times in the New Testament. All 823 times in the Word of God, Jerusalem is mentioned. And by the way, Jesus Christ said in Matthew 5:35 that Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Because one day he's going to reign from that city, amen, as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now, I'd like to look at them over there and say, okay, now open up your Quran and show me where Jerusalem is mentioned in the Quran. Guess what? You know how many times Jerusalem is mentioned in the Quran? It's not even mentioned once in the Quran, but yet they say they have every right to the city of Jerusalem. And by the way, folks, when Jews pray, no matter if they're in Texas, if they're up in the north in Rhode Island, if they're in Japan, Portugal, it doesn't matter. Whenever a Jew prays facing where? Jerusalem. Let me show you something. Go with me to the book of Daniel, chapter number 6. Let me give you a prime example here. Daniel chapter 6. The book of Daniel, excuse me, chapter number 6, looking at verse number 10. Jerusalem is not number 2 in Judaism. It's not number 3 in Judaism. Jerusalem is numero uno. Jerusalem is the holiest place in Judaism. But guess what? In Islam, it's not number 1. It's not even number 2. Jerusalem is the 3rd holiest site in Islam. Notice what the Jewish prophet Daniel is doing here in Daniel chapter 6 verse number 10. And mind you, when this was taking place, Daniel was about 80 years of age. And folks, here he is, 900 miles away from home. From the holy city of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. Daniel was a part of the Babylonian captivity. Even though prayer was illegal at this time, notice what he did. Daniel 6:10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward where? Jerusalem. He kneeled upon his knees. Here he is, 80 years old. He kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime. Wow, 900 miles away from home. Prayer was illegal at this time in Babylon. Yet he opened his windows and he prayed facing Jerusalem. Come with us to Israel next year. I will take you to what they call in Hebrew the Kotel, the Western Wall. Christians call it the Wailing Wall. It was one of the original walls that surrounded the temple. It was one of the retaining walls. When the Romans destroyed the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD, as prophesied by Jesus in Matthew 24, for some reason, the Romans left that wall intact. It was closest to the Holy of Holies, which is why Jews go to that wall and they pray. They'll take their prayer book, put on their talit, their prayer shawl, and they'll just bob like this for hours, just praying for the rebuilding of the 3rd Jewish temple. But here's what they do. Here's how holy Jerusalem is to the Jew. When they're done praying at that wall, they just don't close their book and turn around and walk away. They don't do that. When they're done praying at the wall, you know what they do? They kiss the wall, and instead of just turning around and just walking away, they back up, staring at the wall like this. Just staring at it, and then when they're far enough, they walk away. That's how holy That's how much they reverence the city of Jerusalem. But you want to know something? Every Friday evening on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Muslims by the thousands go up there and they pray. And guess what? When they're done, when they're praying, you know what they do? They don't pray facing Jerusalem. They turn their backs on Jerusalem. They turn their backs on Jerusalem. And they're praying facing the east. Let me show you something else. Go with me to the book of Ezekiel, chapter number 8. You want to talk about an accurate book we have? Look at Ezekiel, chapter number 8. Ezekiel is right before the book of Daniel. Ezekiel, chapter number 8. And notice with me in verse number 16. Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse number 16. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. When Muslims pray, they always pray with their backs facing Jerusalem, and they pray facing the east. Look with me in Daniel chapter 8 and verse number 16, and I'm going to read. And he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and behold, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord, and their faces toward the east, and they worshiped the sun toward the east. What an accurate book we have. That's exactly what the Muslims do. Every Friday, Jews pray facing Jerusalem. These guys turn their backs on Jerusalem and they pray toward the east. Why? What's over there in the east? That's where Mecca is. That's where the Kaaba is. That's where, in pre-Islamic times, those 360 gods were. That's where Muhammad goes to start his new religion, choosing out of all those 360 pagan idols, Allah, the moon god, to represent Islam. That's why they pray facing the east. Jerusalem means nothing to them. It means nothing whatsoever. And yet we find this prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse number 16. But yet, you know, the Muslim so-called holy book, the Quran, claims that the Jews are God's chosen people. You ask them over there today, do you believe the Jews are God's chosen people? No, we don't believe that at all. We're the chosen people. By the way, we replaced you Christians. Just like Christians today are saying that the church has replaced Israel, you got them over there saying, we replaced you. The Quran replaced your corrupt book, the Bible. So we are the chosen people. Again, I would like to point to their attention, surah. And by the way, every chapter in the Quran is a surah, S-U-R-A. In Surah chapter 5, verses 19 through 26, it tells us that God gave the land to Israel. They say, oh, no, the land belongs to us. But yet in their own book, it says God gave the land to Israel. Surah chapter 5, verses 19 through 26. By the way, write these down, folks, because if you bump into one of these guys, you can have something to share with them. The Quran teaches that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. That's Surah chapter 2 and verse number 47. Allah, according to them, Allah chose the Jews as his chosen people above all creatures. Now, our president would say Islam is a religion of peace. Is it? It's far from being a religion of peace. Right. And they're not a religion of the P-E-A-C-E. They're a religion of P-I-E-C-E. Add an S on that because they just want to blow everybody up in pieces. Now, in the Quran, in Surah chapter 9, verse 29, this is what it says. You ready for this? This is what it says in the Quran. Surah chapter 9, verse 29. Muslims, fight everyone who rejects Islam, even if they are Christians and Jews. Fight them until they pay you regular financial tribute with willing submission and feel themselves completely subjected to their Islamic conquerors. Oh yeah, that sounds like a religion of peace, doesn't it? Oh sure, it's a religion of peace when you can walk into a kindergarten school in Pakistan and kill over 151 little children. Muslims killing other Muslims. Oh, that's a religion of peace, isn't it? Yet the prophecy we find in Genesis 16 that Ishmael would be a wild man. His man will be against every hand, and every hand's man will be against him. Butchering over 140 little children in the name of Allah, the moon god. My Bible doesn't tell me or your pastor to strap bombs up to ourselves and walk into some pizza place and blow everybody up because they disagree with our theology. The Bible doesn't tell us to do that. Yet the Quran endorses the murder of Jews and Christians. And Surah chapter 9 verse 29 is just the tip of the iceberg in the Quran. Yet as we tie this all together, Bible prophecy calls for Jerusalem to be the center of controversy in the last days, but folks, it's going to explode in the end times. And all you have to do is read Zechariah 1:14. You can write these down as we tie this all together. Zechariah 1:14, this is what God says about Jerusalem. He says, I am jealous for Jerusalem and Zion with great jealousy. What is the world trying to do today? They're trying to take Jerusalem away from the Jews and give it to their enemies, sworn to their very destruction. God says, I am jealous for Jerusalem with great jealousy. The literal Hebrew says this. God says, I am aggressively possessive of Jerusalem. Then in Zechariah 1:15, God says this. He is sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. God says he is angry over the arrogance of those who possess the Temple Mount and claim it's theirs. That's what the Palestinians are doing today. Jerusalem belongs to us. This is our city. This is our capital. This Temple Mount, by the way, there never was a Jewish temple there. Solomon's temple, you Jews and Christians made it up. Herod's temple, you Jews and Christians are conspiring with each other. You made it up. There never was a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. This is all Islamic, and it belongs to us. When we were last year walking through the Arab quarter, on our way to the Jewish quarter in the city of Jerusalem, our Israeli tour guide stopped right in front of this Arab shop. And there was a picture of the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, that Islamic shrine. He picked it up and he said, folks, this is where Solomon's temple stood for 400 years. This is where Herod's temple stood for 600 years. Jesus Christ, Yeshua, taught in this very temple. Right on that spot right there. And as he's talking, this Arab guy comes running out of the shop. He says, hey, what do you think you're doing? And he said, I'm teaching temple history here. He said, stop lying to these people. There was no such thing as Solomon's temple. No such thing as Herod. You people are making this up. Stop lying. That's Islamic. Now, my Israeli tour guide, all calm and collective, said, sir, you're denying fact. You're denying history. As a matter of fact, there's a 1924 Arab document of the caretakers of the Temple Mount in 1924. They even believed there were two Jewish temples. Totally ignored that and said, stop lying to these people and get out of here right now. So we calmly put the picture down, and as we're walking away, brother, he dropped a series of F-bombs on us. They deny history. They're propagandists. Now, how's that saying go? Tell a lie long enough. Tell a lie long enough, and people will believe it. God says he will one day judge those who arrogantly think they own Jerusalem and that it belongs to them. In Zechariah chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, God says he'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling, literally a cup of intoxication. God says when they try to take Jerusalem from the Jews, I'll make them stagger like drunken men. Then he says, I'll make Jerusalem a burdensome stone. God says, I'll make Jerusalem such a dead weight that when they try to pick up Jerusalem, they'll get a hernia trying to do so. They'll never take Jerusalem from the Jews. And then God says in Zechariah 14:2, I will gather all nations to Jerusalem for battle. People tell me all the time, Brother Rosado, where's America? Where's America in Bible prophecy? Are there any specific references to America? Where is she at this time? And I say there is not one specific reference to America in prophecy. Not one. But I can show you general references to America in prophecy.